Hello, students, and welcome back. Today we are going to be working on another type of factoring, and it's related to distributive and it's related to grouping. So this is called a process called splitting the middle, and it's when we have trinomials that are written in order. Ax squared, so we want the x squared term first, plus bx, the x term second, and then plus c. And what you'll notice is that this is a trinomial, and we are actually going to take the middle term and write it as two terms so that we create four terms that let us then factor by grouping. So there is not really a formula that I can give you, but rather a pattern that we will use. So you first of all will want to write your terms in descending degree order. So that will let you identify then the coefficients A, B, and C. So A is that number in front of the x squared. And for today, the A is going to be a 1. If we don't write a number in front of the x squared, then it is understood to be a 1. The B is the number that is in front of the x. So the B will be our middle term. And then C is our constant, whatever the term is that does not have a variable. And you will be creating a chart to help you find numbers that will multiply to give us the value of whatever A times C is, and at the same time add to give us the value of B. So this process is numerical in nature. You're going to have to think of your factors of this A times C. And once you think of all of those factors, if this process is going to work, there will be one set that will add to what your B value is. And once you discover those numbers, we'll use those numbers to take your middle term, whatever it was, and split it up. So in the example you see showing on your screen, I had 7x and I split it into 3x and 4x. And then after I've made that split, the rest of the process is to factor by grouping, which is what we did in lesson 6. So you'll find that if you have not done lesson 6, that can be a problem that you'll want to take care of. You do want to get that lesson completed. So I'm going to work through this process with you. We have some examples that will show various things that come up, what you do with your signs and things like that. So our first problem is x squared plus 6x plus 8. And as I have talked to you about before, your first approach, your first strategy should be to think of whether or not you could divide each term by the same value. You know, would each one of these divide by x? Well, no, the 8 would not. Would each term divide by 2? No, the x squared would not. So there is no common factor. When that is the case, and we have 3 terms showing, then let's identify our A, B, and C. So A is that number in front of x squared. That would be a 1. Our B is the number in front of x. That would be a 6. And our C is the number that does not have a variable with it. And so that would be an 8. Now, I've created a chart for you to fill in. And on this chart, we're looking for what will multiply to give us A times C. Well, our A is 1 and our C is 8. So 1 times 8 is 8. And then what will add to give us our B value? Well, our B value is 6. Now, we want this to happen simultaneously. We want two numbers that will multiply to 8 and at the same time add up to 6. So if you are not really good with your multiplication facts, you can still work your way through this. Just start thinking of the factors of 8, and you can start with 1. So 1 times what would give you 8? And that would be 8. 1 times 8 gives you 8. But that will not add up to 6. So then we try 2. 2 times what would give you 8? That would be 4. 2 times 4 gives me 8. And 2 plus 4 is actually what gives me 6. So this is my pair that I want to use to split the middle on my problem. So I have my original problem now, x to the second. I'm going to take the two numbers from my table. They were positive 2. Now, I noticed that my middle term has an x. So I've got to put an x with that. So plus 2x. And then my other number was 4, plus 4x. Notice that those two together add up to 6x, my middle term. So my middle term has been split into the 2x and the 4x. And then I'll bring down my last term of 8. And now I'm going to factor this as I did with grouping, drawing a cut line. And I'm going to consider these first two terms, looking at x squared and 2x. They have a common factor that I can divide out of x. Remember that our common factor we write then on the next line outside of a parentheses that we start, and we'll do our dividing. We have x to the second. It's divided by x to the first. Remember that you keep the base and you subtract the exponents. So 2 minus 1 would be x to the first. And we don't usually write that exponent. On our next term, we have 2x divided by x. And so the exponents 1 and 1, those would cancel. 1 minus 1 would give us a 0, but there is still the 2. So we have x plus 2. Remember that in order for this grouping process to work, our parentheses needs to match. So when we divide here, we want to divide by the biggest number that we can that will divide into both 4 and 8. So although it's tempting to use 2, there's a bigger number you need to use. You need to use 4. So 4 is positive. We want to write that positive just like we did for the other side. Whatever we divide by, whatever this number is, we write in front of a parentheses that we are starting. So now we do our dividing. 4 divided by 4 is a 1, but we still have an x. So I could write the 1 in front of the x, but it's not necessary. I do need the x. Plus, and then 8 divided by 4, which is 2. So notice that you get the matching parentheses. So that matching parentheses is one of the factors that you're looking for. So x plus 2 is our common factor. And then if I mark that out, it helps you draw your eyes to the other factor, the terms that are not marked out, which are x plus 4. And those two parentheses would multiply together to give us our original problem of x to the second plus 6x plus 8. So those are the factors of that trinomial. All right, we will move on from here. looking at example number 2, this should be on the back of your papers. So in example number 2, we have the trinomial x squared minus 10x plus 16. So once again, we can try to determine if we could divide everything by something. I usually try to think of 2 or 3, but that x squared cannot be divided by any number, and our 16 cannot be divided by an x. So we have no common factor, and we need to move on to identifying our a, b, and c. So a is the number in front of x squared. That will be a 1. B this time is negative. It's negative 10. And c, our constant, is 16. So now you'll move to your chart. And in the chart, our a times c, well, that's 1 times 16. So we have 16. And our b is negative 10. Be sure you include the sign as you're thinking about this. Now, what we want to do is focus on the multiplication. So thinking about what numbers multiply to 16. And again, if you're not good at your multiplying, start with 1. So what times 1 would give you 16? And that would be 16. Then you go to 2. 2 times what would give you 16? And that is 8. 3 does not work. 4 times 4 would give you 16, and there are no other possibilities. So now we have to think about there's got to be a pair in these sets of numbers where I could work with the negative sign to make it add up to negative 10. Well, my only two numbers that in any way give me 10 would be the 2 and the 8. So now I have to think about how I could get those to add to negative 10. Well, if I make both of those numbers negative, I can get negative 10. Negative 2 plus negative 8 gives me negative 10. But I have to make sure that they still multiply to give me negative 16. And they do. Negative 2 times negative 8 will be positive 16. Negative 2 plus negative 8 will be negative 10. So there is my pair that satisfies both conditions at once. So I'm back to my original problem. I'll take x to the second, and I'm going to split that middle term using my numbers from my table. So they were negative 2, and I have to put an x with it because my middle term has an x. And then negative 8, I have to put an x with that. These two middle terms should still give you what you started with. So they should add up to negative 10x, and they do. And then we want to bring down that last term of plus 16. And then from here, hopefully you're starting to be familiar. You've got your 4 terms. You're going to split that middle. We will look for what can we divide into our first 2 terms. And they have a common variable factor. So we can divide both by x. We'll write that x outside of a parentheses. X to the second divided by x is x. Minus, in your second term, the x's cancel, and you have your 2. So x minus 2. And then, now, in your next section, you have negative 8x and 16. Whenever that third term is negative, which that would be our negative 8, whenever that third term is negative, we want to divide by a negative. So whenever that third term is negative, we have to divide by a negative. So I'm going to go ahead and put a negative sign. We want to use as big a number as we can to divide into 8 and 16. Now, you've got lots of possibilities, so you want to start with the biggest one. So the biggest number that will divide into both 8 and 16 is the 8. But we'll want to make it negative. So negative 8, and then we'll use your parentheses. The negative 8s will divide, and there will just be x. 16 divided by negative 8 will give me negative 2. And now I have my matching parentheses, my common factor of x minus 2. And if I divide that out, my other factor is what's not marked out, x minus 8. And if you check, multiplying together x minus 2 times x minus 8, going through the FOIL process, you would get x squared minus 10x plus 16. We're going to do one last example. I want to really emphasize what to do when you have negatives. So on this problem, we had to have our multiplier remain positive. That means that both of our numbers had to be either both negative or both positive. In order for them to add to a negative, they had to be negative. As we move on to your second example that has a negative in it, number 3, we have x squared plus x minus 12. And for this one, we have just one negative sign. So we want to be careful as we choose our numbers. So we do not have any common factors. I'm going to go ahead and write our A, which is 1. Our B is also 1. And our C is negative 12. So as we move over to the chart, our A times C, now this time our multiplier is negative. 1 times negative 12 is negative 12. And our B term is a 1. So we've got to multiply to negative 12 and add to 1. So we'll think of our numbers that multiply to 12. When you're doing this, just disregard the negative sign for the time being. Just think about the 12. So what multiplies to 12? Well, 1 times 12. 2 will multiply by 6. That'll give us 12. 3 would multiply by 4 and give us 12. And there are no other factors of 12. So now we want to concentrate on what one of these pairs could we make our signs work so that when we add them together, we get a positive 1. Well, the only two that are possible would be this 3 and 4. They're one apart from each other. But we've got to make them be the correct signs. So in order to get a negative 12, one of these will have to be negative. Since our B is a 1, we need our smaller number to be negative so that when we add negative 3 and positive 4, we get our positive 1. So negative 3 plus 4 will give us 1. Negative 3 times 4 will give us negative 12. And it does matter which number is your negative. So make sure that you're thinking about the signs. Use your calculator if necessary. So we'll write our first term, x to the second. Splitting our second term up using our numbers, we have minus 3x and positive 4x. Those are from our chart. And then we want to use our last number, which was negative 12. So drawing the cut line for grouping, we can divide both those first terms by x. We'll write the x outside of our parentheses. X squared divided by x is an x. The x's cancel on the second term, and we have minus 3. We'll then divide each term on the second half by as big a number as we can. And our third term is positive, so we will divide by a positive. We'll divide by positive 4. We want to be sure we put a plus sign for the 4. Start your parentheses. The 4s are going to cancel. We'll have our x, and then negative 12 divided by 4 will be negative 3. And so our x minus 3 is that common parentheses. Our other parentheses is the x plus the 4. And so we have that multiplication where you had a negative and we wanted to use our positive number as the bigger one. So I do have actually one more after this. I had forgotten that I had 4 examples. So our last example is x to the second minus 7x minus 18. So no common factors are there. Our number in front of x squared is a 1. B in this problem is negative 7, and C is negative 18. So our table A times C, 1 times negative 18 is negative 18, and our B is negative 7. So again, you're looking for something to multiply to negative 18. Ignore the negative for right now. Just think about 18. So we'll have 1 times 18, 2 times 9, and 3 times 6. No other numbers are factors of 18. So we have to have a pair that we could work with our signs and make it multiply to a negative. That means we have to have one positive and one negative, and add to negative 7. Since our add number is negative, we want our bigger number to be negative. And the only pair that could possibly work is the 2 and the 9, because they do differ by 7. We want to use a negative on the 9. 2 positive times 9 negative would give you negative 18. Positive 2 plus negative 9 would give you negative 7. So your bigger number was negative, and that's what made the B become a negative. So we're ready to go back to our problem. First term, x squared. Then the middle is split into positive 2x minus 9x. And then our last term of negative 18. We will draw a cut line. You can divide your first terms by x. Having x outside the parentheses, you will have left inside the parentheses x plus 2. Notice that your third term is negative, so we will divide by a negative. I'm going to go ahead and put that negative sign down in my next line. The biggest number that will divide into 18 and 9 is a 9. So we're going to actually divide by negative 9, and then we'll have our parentheses, do our dividing. The negative 9s will cancel. We'll have x, and negative 18 divided by negative 9 is positive 2. So our matching parentheses, x plus 2, and our other factor, x minus 9. So I hope that you saw the pattern that occurred in each problem. It's the same pattern over and over, and we're hopeful that you get the number sense that you need in order to be able to do these problems successfully. Please be sure to reach out to your teachers if you have questions, and good luck on homework 7.